Today I'm joined by fellow National Geographic Explorer and incredible photographer Thomas Rowell to go over 3 guiding principles of composition that go beyond the rule of thirds. For each principle, we'll share sample images, analyze them with notations, and at the end, we'll walk you through a simple tool that you can use to start training your eye so that great framing becomes instinct and luck becomes skill. Let's throw it to Austin in Las Vegas. Thanks, Austin. Back home in Berkeley. I am here in Las Vegas where Thomas and I just finished up a shoot. Thomas, why do you think that photography and studying photography can be so valuable to us as documentary cinematographers?
I think it's the same job. We're doing the same job, just different, whether it's moving or still, it doesn't matter. You're telling a story within a frame.
All right, so let's jump into our first guiding principle. Thomas, introduce it to us.
Mind your corners. This is a tool, a gift really, that was given to me by a wonderful commercial and documentary photographer based in LA named Greg Vore. If you think about what's happening in your corners, you are thinking much deeper about what's happening within your frame. Mm-hmm. And to me, what I really hear in that phrase and what has meant to me in my practice is to think deeper about the story. Where are we putting the subject within the frame? So if you're conscious of the corners, you're conscious of the entire frame. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And as cinematographers, it's really easy for us to be so focused on our subject and following our subject in real time and always making sure they're in the center of the frame potentially, that it's very easy to lose sense of what we have this small little square, what's happening in every inch of the frame. So let's dig into some photos that illustrate this concept powerfully. So show us what we got here.
For this segment, we're going to talk about one photographer that I think is a master of corners, Vivian Maier. So Vivian Maier was a documentary photographer throughout a lot of the 20th century and in several different cities in the United States and France. With this, just as one example, I just wanted to show this one because to me, she's nailing the corners here, right? Everything that we're seeing in the corners means something to the person that draws us in, right? Like if she had pulled in anymore, if we were just looking at this, like it would be too much about him. Mm-hmm. If we were any further back, it would be too much about the city. I'm seeing just enough of the city over here to know sort of where he is. But of course, just being able to see the full stand, we're couching this person well within a story. And here again, if we're just looking at the corners, what is the information that we're getting from each corner? If this is a corner that draws my eye, if this corner weren't there, I would have questions about what's happening, where they are. Like maybe they're at a rally or something like that. Yeah. But the fact that that corner is filled with what looks like an awning to me, I'm now seeing that they're heading into a building, they're heading into some event.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, this guy in the center is much more interesting. Like, why is he looking the other way? Is he waiting for somebody? What's going on there? What's the story?
I, as both a cinematographer or a photographer, would have my natural inclination be, if this is my subject, my main subject right here, I would be so quick to zoom in and like capture his interesting expression, and what I would lose is everything that's going on in this corner with this person. And this kind of having this person and a little bit of that fuzzy focus in the foreground and in that corner is interesting because this person looks like they're moving. Yeah. They're moving in to wherever that awning is, and he's looking out. There's just like this cool kind of motion, the sense of motion that you get between those two.
Yeah, and I think that comes from minding your corners. So
let's check out another one.
Let's look at each corner in this frame. What does like each corner have in it? And I think initially you might look at it and say, well, it's empty. But to me, every corner here is advancing the story. So what we see is this guy, and the more we look, we see blood coming out of his eye here. So he's clearly been in a fight. It looks like he might be drunk. Why can't he walk? So we see obviously a police officer is taking care of him, but who's this guy? Like, why is this man in the suit carrying him?
Yeah, it looks like a lawyer or something.
Right, and so when I start looking back at the corners, like, okay, they're coming from the dark. They're heading into the light.
Yeah, it looks like a spotlight or something in that foreground.
Right, so are they bringing him back into the police station? It raises good questions about the story to me. So it's not only has she nailed being in the right place at the right time in terms of making sure she's in a spot to have the right kind of light, I think she's using her corners in this photograph to nail the story, to place this person within the scene. If they were any further in, it's too much about him, but here I'm getting the feeling of what it's like to be in a city.
For me as a cinematographer, and maybe all you who are watching, I often have the tendency to be on that f-stop and go the lowest number as possible. I'm on like 2.8 or 1.4, because again, it looks like that creamy background. But I think what some of these images are showing to me is that be intentional about that aperture so that you have details in this space. Also, you have details in this space because the setting is a character.
None of our subjects ever live in a void. Our characters live somewhere, and it is more than likely that the place they're in has something to say about who they are. And so tell me that. When I want to see that in the photograph, I want to see, or in the moving image, I want to see how the place is informing them. And Greg's reminder to mind your corners has really helped me do that. Here again, this is the last example of Vivian Myers we're going to use with the subjects here. It's clearly kids. Seems to me like we're following kids. And another thing in the corner that really helps me tell that story is this bike. This photograph makes me feel something. Whereas I feel that if she was just taking this photo, the only feeling I would get is, oh yeah, knobby knees. But because she's got the bike in the corner, the gum on the streets, the nasty, gritty concrete in the streets, the car over here, and the trash can, I get the feeling I'm able to be in the place with her and remember what it's like to be a kid taking my bike out on the street, like what it feels like to be out there. And she's doing that by showing us knees.
Right. So this guiding principle around minding your corners, it's something that Thomas shared with me a year or two ago, and it's been a real unlock for me as a cinematographer, not only to think about how we're placing our characters within a setting, but even as something as simple as think about how many times you've set up an interview. You can control every inch of the frame, and then you get back and you put it on a computer and you're like, oh, I didn't even notice that there was that little outlet that was like on the wall in the corner there that looks like so tacky, or there's like something up in this corner that's like a reflection from a light that I had on my subject. So this has reminded me not only to think about setting and how to use that in story, but also in something as simple as setting up an interview, making sure that I'm always scanning the entire frame to make sure everything is intentional. All right, guiding principle number 2.
Arrange the nouns and wait for the verbs. This is a rule that we both learned from a wonderful photographer, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist named Kim Kamenik. One of probably the best and the earliest examples of this is Henri Bresson's work. Henri Bresson was there at the advent of film photography. So this is composition 101. The way that Kim Kamenik says it, and I think is right, is that this staircase existed for centuries. It might have been there for 150 years.
Yeah.
But Henri Bresson saw the place where he liked the shape of the photograph, and it was missing something. He liked the geometry of it, he liked the way it looked, but it was missing some life. So he waiting for the moment that this bicyclist came.
In how it relates to the guiding principle, we have our nouns, which is the staircase, the geometry,
the curve,
the curve up here. Pretty much everything in this frame is the noun that has been there for centuries. And then he waited for the verb, which is the cyclist, to go through the frame and right into that little gap there. Arranging the nouns and then waiting for that action, waiting for the verb. All right, let's see another one.
So this way of working is near and dear to my heart because I work with wildlife conservation, and I'm starting to work with camera trapping. So I think camera trapping is just a really good illustration of this rule. In camera trapping, I have put a DSLR inside of a weatherproof case, and I put it out in the forest for months, waiting for a photograph to happen. And so in that case, the nouns are all that I have. I'm waiting for an animal to walk by. So again, just to illustrate this idea, let's look at this photo from Steve Winter. He had this idea to try to get a photo of a cougar with the Hollywood sign inside of a city, right? This would be a great illustration of the fact that wildlife interact with the cities, right? So again, it's all about story. He went out there and found this trail where they thought, okay, maybe animals use this trail. all he could do was arrange the noun. So he set the camera at the height he thought, if a puma comes by, I'm gonna still be able to get the Hollywood sign in the background, right? Because if he had put the camera any lower, the animal, when they walked by, would have blocked the Hollywood sign.
Right.
So he had to be very, very careful arranging his nouns. He had to know the height, the average height of a puma. And then they have to walk away, they have to leave. He waited a year for this animal to walk by and take this photograph.
Wow.
So he arranged the noun and waited for the verb a frickin' year.
I think one of the things that I'm taking away from that photograph, and can be really hard nowadays when we are pressured as documentary filmmakers and video creators of all sorts to just put out things really fast, is that arranging your nouns and making sure your composition is something that you're really happy with and waiting for that verb can take a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many people don't do it.
Yeah.
You know?
And this is an extreme example. So let's go to something that's a little bit more relevant for most people. This is a great example of arranging your nouns. She was inside of this cabin. You can see she's waiting here by this open door. And who knows how many frames she got before this walrus walked perfectly into frame. And again, mind your corners here. Like let's look at even the compositional rule of kind of leading you into the center here. These diagonal lines, the leading lines kind of bringing you in. But again, look at the details in the corners. Like if it were any tighter, we wouldn't know where we were. If we were any further back, the focus wouldn't necessarily be on the walrus.
I think what's really cool about this image right here is not only is she an amazing documentary photographer, but she's also a documentary filmmaker and made a film about really like this specific moment in time that we see here. There's a film that captures it as well, where she does the same thing, which is arranging the nouns and waiting for the verbs. This is in a documentary called Haul Out, which was nominated for an Oscar for documentary short. So let me show you this here. Okay, so
unbelievable
moment. Who knows again how long that she was there on that tripod, but you capture this authentic moment. I think this is a way that we as documentary filmmakers can think about being intentional about the composition and waiting for that action to enter. Let's move on to the next guiding principle, which we don't have a catchy saying for, and we're just calling it geometry.
Or shape your eye. This is an example of another of my favorite documentary photographers, a woman named Erica Larson, based in Florida. I just wanted to bring up this portrait as a way to talk about my workflow when I bring a photograph in. So I'm gonna pretend like this is my photograph for a second. When I bring a photograph into Lightroom, one of the first things that I'm looking at is the crop tool. Not because my intention is to crop it, but just because I want to see how it plays with sort of the rules of composition. There's a gut reaction that we all have when we like something, right? When you like something from someone else or something that you made.
Something just hits and you're just like, that feels right, like that feels nice.
And like, what is it? Why does it feel good?
Yeah.
This is a way of gut checking, of saying like, okay, I like this picture, why do I like it? I bring it in to say, okay, let's see how it gut checks. Mm-hmm. Boom. Right off the bat, rule of thirds. Everybody knows the rule of thirds. I'm like, well, that's one reason I like it. It fits perfectly into the rule of thirds. Yeah. Then I start playing around with the other rules. Like rule of thirds, that's a great one. Yeah. Everyone should know and think about.
So what button are you pushing here?
So I press the O on a Mac in Lightroom, and that allows me to switch around. And when I really know that something has really hit, or certainly if you're looking at a master like Erica Larson, it's going to hit on multiple different types of grids or layouts or guidelines.
Okay.
So like this one, for example.
Oh, wow.
Nails it.
Yeah.
You know, she's using multiple compositional guidelines to lead you in to tell the story.
Yeah, you can't help but have your attention focused towards him because of those trees that are, the branches of the trees that are down. We've
got this really strong diagonal here as well that's working. These all of these lines are bringing me in the right way to the right places, basically.
Yeah, should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
This is an image that stuck with me ever since I saw it, and this is from a photographer named Finbar O'Reilly. I believe he's freelance, does a lot of work for the New York Times, a lot of work in conflict zones, and this was one of those images that just stopped me because I mean, everything compositionally is so beautiful. If we're thinking about some of the rules that we've already gone over of arranging the nouns, waiting for the verbs, I would guess that Finbar was waiting here, arranging these soldiers in the foreground and making sure that each of them had their own space. None of them are crossing over each other's space. And then waiting for this helicopter who, you know, the helicopter might have started over here. It might have come in like this, but waiting for the helicopter to have its own space in between these two heads really like draws your eye right in there. It's so beautiful. And so if we pull up some of these cropping tools that Thomas was just talking about, this is one that's called the golden rule, right?
Yeah. It's based on Fibonacci's sequence called the golden rule. There's a bunch of the golden ratio. There's other names for it as well. Theoretically, what's happening here is that your eye, it's really hard to draw something like that. Your eye is going along this line and following all the way through the photograph. Now we're not quite like perfectly nailing Fibonacci's sequence here, but I mean, come on, like we're getting there.
Yeah.
Like this is, I mean, what a masterful photograph. Another thing that some of the great teachers talk about with this rule is that the very end here, the very end of the sequence is very often, not always, but very often the secondary piece of information, the second most important piece of information.
These soldiers here are kind of our primary information, and then the secondary piece of information is the helicopter, which is probably coming to get them, I would say.
This is where these become guidelines and not rules.
Yeah.
Like this photographer is nailing the helicopter on the line. So what a wonderful example of this golden ratio, even if you know, it could have been quote unquote more perfect. It doesn't matter. Like really in the end of the day, they're using this rule to guide your eye in a way that makes you feel something.
All right, let's move to the next one. And, okay, here we go.
So this is our last, the image we're gonna end on. So talking about, again, with this gut check, when I'm coming in and bringing these photos in to play around with these different rules, I'm doing that in order to train my eye for the next time.
This image is from Randy Olson. So let's walk through some of these guidelines.
Yeah, so this is from a series that he did on maternal health in Russia, is that right?
Yeah.
So here in each third, he is just nailing information. We've got very important information.
And at the intersections, like this intersection, you have like the main nurse who's helping with the birth. We have over here the reflection. You're placing key informations at those intersections, which is
that's masterful. That's what the masters do.
Right.
So then we start looking at other rules here. The diagonal. I love. I find my eye drawn often to this like kind of diagonal. There's something off balance about it. This diagonal is unexpected almost. There's something unexpected
right here, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is just a way of confirming that gut check of like, why did this one float to the top for me? And usually it's scratching the itch of multiple things. So here, if we're really analyzing this one on this diagonal, there we go. We've got this diagonal is going right over her eye line. So again, all I'm seeing in that is right. Okay, nailed it. Clock it for the next time. Just like flex that muscle basically for the next time.
Yeah.
Again, we've got this diagonal going right through her eye, bringing us all the way, like this really strong diagonal push going all the way across the photograph and separating the information on that side from what's happening on the other side.
And minding your corners. Look at that. We have the eyes. It's not cut right here. Right?
Yeah. If he had just like tilted down slightly, dead. The photo's dead. And then if we're looking into this segment here. We've got this quadrant here where there's so much information happening. I mean, there's just so much for your eye to go towards.
Yeah, to like explore. There's so many things to explore in this one frame.
And nothing wasted. I mean, even over here, we're looking at the bedpan. We're putting ourselves even more firmly in the situation of the hospital, knowing where these people are and what the problem is, or what the story is, what the struggle is.
Okay, so let's look at this.
Almost most importantly, maybe again with the golden ratio, just completely nailing this, where from the top left corner, your eye is being drawn all the way down and around to arguably in this one, the most important bit of information, which is the woman giving birth. So we're actually looking through a window, it looks like, into another room.
Wow.
So again, I might say this is maybe the most important thing here, because now we're seeing like, oh, it's not just one, this is happening. Like, how many people are giving birth at the same time? Like, this is clearly adding to the story here.
Yeah. And this, what's happening here? I mean, this expression to me is like haunting. Almost. And a moment later, it's gone. Yeah.
So Kim Comenick, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, also says a term that I really like of his is the bento box.
Okay.
And I think this is another really good example of the bento box, where everything has its place. So you got this little, in the upper right corner, you have this nice, beautiful frame within a frame. You have this mirror with a story back here, and furthering the story of the chaos and the many people it's taking to do this work in the space. Everything exists within its own space and frame.
All right, so to recap our guiding principles, we had 1, mind your corners, 2, arrange the nouns, wait for the verbs, and 3, geometry, shape your eye. Thomas, that's a lot of information we just threw at people right there. So how should cinematographers, documentary filmmakers out there, or documentary photographers be thinking about how to use these principles? I mean, it can feel overwhelming.
How to practice.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I would say is slow down. We all think that this is something that you either have or you don't have, and I just don't think that's true. I think any person that wants to be taking photographs or videos can get better over time and can get a stronger eye. My eye, I feel, is getting stronger every day. And so slowing down and practicing. When you slow down and you start looking at these things in any frame that you're gonna make, let's say you're sitting down to make an interview for someone, and really taking an extra, even just 30 seconds, if you're in a real rush, an extra 30 seconds to make sure that you like the corners, to make sure that you have arranged the nouns in the way that you want, so that when there's a person moving or an animal moving within your frame, the verbs are telling the story that you want to be told, right? I think it's about slowing down. Okay. And I think that it's a reminder for me that this is practice, that this is a practice. Yeah. I have not reached where I hope to reach with photography. Yeah. I'm just beginning, and I think that we all are, really until we're dead. So these are tools that I will be using and thinking about when I'm out. Like today I'm gonna try to find a golden rule. I'm gonna go out into the world and I'm just gonna see if I can find a golden rule, because I promise you they exist everywhere. Yeah. In flowers, in street corners, in designs. You might find an architectural videography you're gonna do, or photos. So maybe you find just one. Maybe today you're like, I'm just gonna think about what's in my corners. I'm not gonna think about anything else. Yeah. And so you slow down, and you go outside, whether it's for something you need to make or something you just wanna make, and you just think about one of these principles at a time. Think about how they can help you tell your story, how these rules, these practices can help you tell your story.
Yeah. The idea here is that when you're out in the field making your film, everything is chaos. You can't be thinking about Fibonacci and the golden rule and thirds and diagonals all the time in your head, while also listening to what your characters are saying and also trying to follow action. The goal here is to study these principles so that they slowly over time can become instinct. Yeah. And then you're just gonna see them without even thinking about it, capturing those images, and then the audience is gonna sit back and look at your work and be like, wow, that feels beautiful. That feels like I'm drawn into that image in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been otherwise.
These aren't rules that we made up. The reason Lightroom has those presets is that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of art behind us that we've all sort of coalesced into agreeing that these things work. Why do they work? So be curious about why it works.
Yeah, why a photograph works, why these patterns arise in nature, why a piece of video that you're drawn to, why that works.
Yeah, be curious about why it works, and be curious about why it doesn't work too. Yeah. I think that's another fun thing to look at. Like, why doesn't it work? Oh, because it doesn't match anything.
Thanks so much for watching this long video. Thomas, thanks so much for joining the channel. And let us know if you want more video breakdowns like this about composition, and we'll definitely bring more to the channel. We'll see you next week. Go out and tell some stories.
Awesome.
Nice job.